Browns just made a move that's raising serious questions across the league, and nobody's talking about it the right way. While everyone debates quarterbacks, Cleveland quietly sent a message that changes everything. Is this confidence or a risky gamble that could backfire fast? Because this decision might define their entire future, and what happens next could flip the entire narrative overnight. Something about this didn't feel normal, and that's exactly why people started paying attention. The Cleveland Browns didn't just hint at their quarterback situation, they controlled the narrative. No leaks, no insider reports, no buildup from analysts, just a direct, calculated message pushed out on their own platforms, and the moment it dropped, it raised eyebrows across the league. Because this wasn't just an update, it felt like a declaration. All eyes suddenly shifted to Shedeur Sanders. Not Deshaun Watson, not any veteran option, not even potential draft competition, just Shedeur, front and center, as if the decision had already been made behind closed doors and now the rest of the world was simply being informed. That's what made it unusual. Teams don't normally move like this, especially not at quarterback. Usually there's ambiguity, competition, media speculation, but this felt different. It felt intentional, almost strategic. Some fans saw confidence. Others saw something else entirely. Because when a franchise goes this far to spotlight one player this early, it naturally raises a bigger question: why now? Was this about belief, or was it about controlling the conversation before it spirals? And then there's the timing. Reports had been circulating for months, rumors about potential veteran signings, whispers of internal uncertainty, even quiet debates about whether Cleveland should explore other options. None of it officially confirmed, but enough noise to create doubt. Then suddenly silence, replaced by one clear message: Shedeur Sanders is the guy. And just like that, the narrative flipped. But here, where things get even more interesting. Because this wasn't just about announcing a quarterback, it was about how they did it. No involvement from major insiders, no buildup through media channels, even prominent voices around the league were caught off guard. That doesn't happen by accident. Some believe this was the Browns taking control of their story, cutting out speculation, shutting down debates, and setting the tone early. Others think it's a calculated risk. Because when you publicly commit like this, there's no walking it back quietly. Now the pressure isn't just internal, it's everywhere. Fans are watching, analysts are waiting, and every move from here on out will be judged through this decision. That's the part people aren't talking about enough. This isn't just a quarterback situation anymore. This is a statement. And if it works, Cleveland looks like they saw something nobody else did. But if it does, that silence they created could come back louder than ever. And that's when everything really starts to change. No one expected it to happen like that, not even him. When Shedeur Sanders entered the draft conversation, the expectations were clear. Big name, big production, big spotlight. This wasn't supposed to be a quiet entry into the league, it was supposed to be a statement. But then draft night unfolded, and everything changed. Names started coming off the board, one after another. Quarterbacks, skill players, defensive stars, and somehow Shedeur's name just kept not getting called. That's when the conversation shifted. Some analysts started questioning his fit, others pointed at system concerns. A few even suggested teams were hesitant not about talent but about everything that comes with the name. The attention, the expectations, the spotlight tied to Shedeur Sanders. Nothing was ever confirmed, but the whispers were loud enough. And the longer he waited, the louder they got. For a player once projected much higher, the slide didn't just surprise people, it raised eyebrows across the league. Fans started reacting in real time. Social media lit up. Some called it disrespect, others called it reality. Either way, it wasn't the script anyone had written. Then came the moment. The Cleveland Browns made the call. Not in the early rounds, not in the spotlight moments, but later when the noise had already taken over the narrative. And that's what made it different. Because Cleveland didn't just draft a quarterback, they picked up a storyline that had already been building pressure for hours. Some saw it as a steal. Others saw it as a gamble. But for Shedeur, it was something else entirely: fuel. Because players don't forget moments like that, they don't forget the teams that passed. They don't forget the questions, the doubts, the hesitation, and whether it's fair or not, those moments tend to stick. That's where things started to shift internally. Reports suggested he stayed composed, focused, locked in, no public frustration, no dramatic reactions, just quiet confidence and a clear understanding that the real story hadn't started yet. And maybe that's what Cleveland saw. Not just the talent, but the response. Because sliding in the draft can break some players, but for others it sharpens them. And that's where the Browns may have made their real decision, not on draft night, but in the way he handled everything that came with it. Still, one question hasn't gone away. Did the league miss on him? Or did Cleveland take a risk others weren't willing to take? Because if that draft slide turns into motivation, then what looked like a fall might actually be the moment everything started. Here, what most people missed, while the spotlight was somewhere else, the real story was quietly unfolding. Shedeur Sanders didn't come into the league with immediate control of the offense. There was no dramatic takeover, no instant QB1 headlines. In fact, early on, he was barely part of the national conversation. And that's exactly why this part matters. Because when he finally stepped onto the field, there was no hype protecting him. No excuses waiting, just real NFL defenses and real pressure. In limited action, the numbers didn't jump off the page at first glance. Around 1,400 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, a small sample size spread across multiple appearances, nothing that would dominate headlines or trend across sports media. But that's where people got it wrong. Because this wasn't about volume. It was about control. When you actually look at those snaps, something different starts to show up. Composure, timing, decision-making that didn't feel rushed. He wasn't playing like someone overwhelmed by the speed of the league. He looked settled. And that raised quiet questions inside league circles. Because rookie quarterbacks usually show flashes mixed with chaos. Big plays followed by mistakes, confidence followed by hesitation. That's the normal pattern. This didn't feel like that. Instead, it looked measured, almost calculated, like he understood exactly what was being asked and stayed within it. Some analysts pointed out his efficiency. Others mentioned how rarely he forced throws under pressure, nothing overly flashy but nothing reckless either. And in a league where turnovers can define a career early, that matters more than people admit. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns were still figuring things out as a whole. Offensive inconsistency, protection issues, play calling adjustments. It wasn't a perfect situation for any quarterback, let alone a rookie trying to prove himself. But that context actually made his performance more interesting. Because he wasn't stepping into a clean system. He was navigating through instability and still keeping things under control. That's not something casual fans always notice, but inside the building, that gets attention. Some reports suggested coaches valued how quickly he adapted. Others believed his calm approach helped stabilize moments that could have easily spiraled. Nothing officially dramatic, no viral moments, just steady progress. And sometimes that's more dangerous than hype. Because hype can fade. But consistency, that builds trust. And that's when the conversation started to shift, quietly behind the scenes. Not is he talented, but is he ready sooner than expected? Still, none of it was loud enough to change the public narrative yet. Because from the outside, it still looked like a backup finding his way. But inside Cleveland, the evaluation was already moving in a very different direction. And what they decided next is what caught everyone off guard. There's something about this situation that goes beyond football, and it's impossible to ignore. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just another young quarterback trying to find his place in the league. He carries a name that already means something everywhere. Shedeur Sanders. And that changes everything. From the outside, it looks like an advantage. Built-in confidence, elite mentorship, a lifetime around the game. The kind of preparation most players can only dream about, learning directly from one of the most electrifying personalities football has ever seen. But inside the spotlight, it's not that simple. Because every throw gets compared, every mistake gets amplified, every success gets questioned. Was it earned or expected? That's the pressure nobody really talks about. Some fans believe having Dayan as a father gives Shedeur an edge that others don't have. Others argue it creates a different kind of weight, the kind that follows you into every stadium, every interview, every snap. And the truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. Because this isn't just about talent, it's about perception. From high school to college, the narrative never really changed. When Shedeur won games, people pointed at the system. When he put up numbers, some credited the environment. When he stayed composed, it was seen as normal, not exceptional. That's the double standard. And it didn't disappear when he reached the NFL. If anything, it got louder. Some reports suggested teams had mixed opinions during the draft process, not necessarily about his ability, but about the spotlight that comes with him. The attention, the expectations, the constant media presence tied to the Sanders name. Nothing officially confirmed, but enough speculation to shape how people viewed his journey. And that's where things get complicated. Because pressure can do one of two things: it can break a player or sharpen them. So far, Shedeur hasn't looked overwhelmed by it. In fact, his approach has been the opposite. Calm, controlled, focused on details. Almost like he's been preparing for this level of scrutiny his entire life. Which in reality, he probably has. But here where the real shift happens. Because the Cleveland Browns aren't treating this like a marketing story. They're not just leaning into the name, they're building around the player. And that sends a different message. It says they believe the production matches the pressure. Still, not everyone is convinced. Some fans are waiting to see what happens when things go wrong, because that's the true test, not when everything is smooth, but when adversity hits. How does he respond then? Does the pressure grow louder, or does it disappear? That's the part no one can predict. But one thing is clear. The Dayan Sanders effect isn't going away. It will follow every game, every decision, every moment this season. And depending on how Shedeur handles it, it could either become his biggest advantage, or the one thing people point to if everything starts to fall apart. And that's where the story starts getting even more interesting. Before the NFL questions, before the draft slide, before the QB1 conversation, there was a stretch where ignoring Shedeur Sanders simply wasn't possible. And it didn't start on the biggest stage. It started at Jackson State Tigers football. At the time, some people weren't paying attention. Smaller program, less national coverage, lower expectations, but inside that environment, something was building fast. Wins. Consistency. Control. Over 2 seasons, Shedeur didn't just play well, he dominated in a way that forced people to look twice. A 23-3 record as a starter, efficient passing, smart decision-making, minimal mistakes. He wasn't just winning games, he was commanding them. That's when the first shift happened. Because at some point, the numbers become too loud to ignore. Still, critics had their angle. They're not playing top competition. It's the system. It's the coaching. And whether fair or not, those questions followed him. So what did he do? He changed the stage. The move to Colorado Buffaloes football wasn't just a transfer, it was a statement. A jump into a bigger spotlight, stronger competition, more pressure, more eyes watching every throw. And that's where things got interesting. Because instead of slowing down, he elevated. Right away, the impact was visible. Colorado, a program that had struggled to stay relevant, suddenly became one of the most talked about teams in college football. Primetime games, packed stadiums, national attention every single week. And at the center of it all, Shedeur. He didn't just manage games, he rewrote expectations. Over his time there, he became the program's all-time leader in passing touchdowns. His efficiency didn't drop against tougher defenses, it improved. His command of the offense looked sharper. His confidence looked natural, not forced. And then came the numbers that really made people pause. A 165.9 passer rating in one of his standout seasons. Big-time performances under pressure. Moments where the game slowed down for him while everything around him sped up. That's not easy to fake. That's not just system-driven. That's where talent starts separating from narrative. But even then, the conversation didn't fully shift. Some analysts still questioned how his game would translate. Others focused on traits instead of production. A few believed he benefited too much from familiarity, especially playing under Shedeur Sanders at different stages. Again, nothing confirmed as a real limitation, but enough noise to keep the debate alive. And that's what made his college career so unique. Because it wasn't just about performance, it was about constantly proving that the performance was real. Every level he stepped up to, the same questions followed. And every time he answered them. But here's the part that matters now. College dominance doesn't always guarantee NFL success. We've seen that story before. The difference is how that dominance was built. In Shedeur's case, it wasn't just highlight plays or explosive moments, it was discipline, timing, reading defenses, staying composed when things broke down. The kind of traits that don't always go viral, but translate when the game gets harder. And that's exactly why the Cleveland Browns paid attention. Not just to what he did, but how he did it. Because when you strip away the noise, the debates, and the narratives, what's left is a quarterback who kept producing, no matter the stage. And that's the kind of detail teams don't overlook, even if the rest of the league did. This is where everything starts to connect, and where the real story begins to reveal itself. Because what the Cleveland Browns are doing right now doesn't look random. It doesn't look like a temporary solution, and it definitely doesn't look like a team still figuring things out. It looks intentional. For years, the biggest criticism around Cleveland was simple: no stability at quarterback and no real structure built to support one, different systems, constant changes, a revolving door that never really allowed anything to settle. That's what made this shift stand out. Because instead of searching again, they've started building. And everything points in one direction: Shedeur Sanders. It begins with protection. Reports and moves suggest the Browns made serious efforts to fix one of their biggest weaknesses, the offensive line. New additions, key reinforcements, a clear focus on giving their quarterback time in the pocket. That's not a small adjustment. That's a foundational change. Because when a team prioritizes protection first, it usually means one thing: they believe in the quarterback enough to invest around him. Then comes the coaching shift. The presence of Todd Monken brings a different philosophy, more aggressive through the air, more spread concepts, a system that leans into quarterback strengths instead of limiting them. And here where it gets interesting. Monken isn't new to this type of setup. He's built offenses designed to maximize quarterback decision-making and timing, systems where the QB isn't just a piece, but the centerpiece. Some reports claim this connection goes deeper, that there was already interest in Shedeur before this moment, nothing officially confirmed, but enough to suggest this wasn't a last-minute decision. If that's true, then this plan didn't just start recently. It's been forming. Then there's the roster construction. Young receivers, developing playmakers, a running game that's expected to take pressure off the passing attack. Not a finished product, but a group that's clearly being shaped to grow alongside the quarterback. That's a different approach. Because instead of bringing in established veterans to carry the offense, Cleveland seems to be building a timeline, one where everything develops together. Quarterback, receivers, system, all aligned. And that's where the strategy becomes clear. This isn't about short-term fixes. This is about long-term control. But here's the part that raises questions. Because building around a quarterback this early, especially one still proving himself, comes with risk. A lot of it. If the development hits, everything looks smart, calculated, ahead of schedule. But if it does, then every move gets reevaluated. Every decision gets questioned. And suddenly, what looked like confidence starts getting labeled as overcommitment. Some fans are already split on it. Some believe Cleveland finally found direction. Others think they're moving too fast, putting too much on a player still in his early stages. Both sides have a point. Because the NFL doesn't wait. There's no long runway for development without results, especially at quarterback. And that's why this plan is so fascinating. It's bold. It's clear. And it leaves very little room for doubt about who this team is betting on. There's no hiding behind competition, no fallback narrative, no slow rollout. This is a commitment. And commitments like this don't stay quiet for long. Because once the season starts, everything gets tested. The protection, the system, the chemistry, and most importantly, the quarterback at the center of it all. If it works, Cleveland doesn't just stabilize the position, they change their entire identity. But if it does, then this plan quickly becomes the biggest question mark in the league. And that's when the pressure really begins. This is where things stop being about potential and start becoming about proof. Because for Shedeur Sanders, the second year isn't just another step, it's the moment the league decides what he actually is. Not what he could be, what he is. And historically, this is where the conversation gets real. Year 1, there's room for patience, excuses, adjustments. Fans and analysts talk about development curves, learning speed, system fit. Mistakes get explained away, growth gets highlighted more than flaws. But year 2, that's different. That's when expectations quietly shift without anyone announcing it. Suddenly it's not he's learning. It's he should know. And that's the pressure standard that changes everything. Across the league, second-year quarterbacks are judged by a very specific lens. Not perfection, but progression. Clear, visible, undeniable improvement. Better reads, faster decisions, more control when things break down. Not flashes. Consistency. And that's where the comparisons start creeping in. Players like Dak Prescott took that leap early, turning solid rookie performances into full control of an offense. Others, like Brock Purdy, didn't just improve, they elevated the entire system around them. That becomes the benchmark. Fair or not? Now here's the part that makes this situation even more intense. Shedeur isn't just stepping into year 2 quietly. He's stepping into it as the projected QB1 for the Cleveland Browns. That changes the expectations instantly. Because now it's not about if he plays. It's about how well he performs. Every snap matters. Every drive gets analyzed. Every decision gets broken down, not just by coaches, but by fans, media, and a league that's already watching closely. And here, where the numbers start entering the conversation. Historically, second-year quarterbacks who establish themselves as reliable starters tend to hit certain ranges. Around 60–65% completion rate, over 3,000 passing yards, close to 20 touchdowns, limiting turnovers. Not elite, but stable, functional, a foundation teams can build on. If Shedeur hits those numbers, the narrative shifts in his favor fast. He becomes the guy. The Browns move forward with confidence. But if he falls short, that's when the conversation changes. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly and noticeably. Questions start appearing. Is he progressing fast enough? Is the system helping him or holding him back? Did Cleveland commit too early? And here's the reality most people don't want to say out loud. Quarterbacks don't just get evaluated on performance. They get evaluated on expectations. And right now, expectations around Shedeur are rising fast. Because of the name. Because of the college production. Because of how the Browns are positioning him. All of it adds weight. But there's another layer to this. Because some fans believe he's being set up to succeed. Others believe he's being set up to be tested. There's a difference. A big one. If everything clicks, protection holds, receivers develop, the system fits, then year 2 becomes a breakout opportunity. But if things aren't perfect, if the line struggles, if chemistry takes time, if the offense isn't fully synchronized, then suddenly the pressure multiplies. Because now it's not just about development, it's about response. How does he handle adversity? How does he react when momentum swings? Does he stay composed, or does the game start speeding up? That's what separates potential from reality. And that's why year 2 is so important. It exposes everything. Strengths, weaknesses, mental toughness, leadership, all of it. And the league notices. Because by the end of this season, there won't be much mystery left. Teams will know how to defend him. Analysts will know how to evaluate him. Fans will know what to expect. That's how fast the narrative locks in. But here's the part that makes this situation different. Because unlike most second-year quarterbacks, Shedeur isn't entering this season with uncertainty around his role. He's entering it with responsibility. The Browns aren't easing him in. They're handing him the keys. And when that happens, there's no middle ground. You either take control of the situation, or the situation starts controlling you. That's the reality of this stage. And that's why this season isn't just important. It's defining. Because by the time it's over, the question won't be, what can he become? It'll be something much more direct. Did Cleveland get it right? Or did they move too soon? And once that answer starts forming, it doesn't take long for the entire league to follow. Here, where the story takes a turn most people don't see coming, because what's happening on the field isn't the only battle being fought. There's another one, and it's just as important. The narrative. Right now, Shedeur Sanders isn't just playing against defenses, he's moving through a constant wave of opinions, debates, and media storylines that shift almost daily. And the truth, not all of them match reality. From the moment the Cleveland Browns started pushing him toward QB1, the conversation split into two very different directions. One side sees a confident organization finally committing to a young quarterback. The other sees a team forcing a narrative too early. And once that divide starts, it doesn't go away. It grows. Because media coverage in the NFL doesn't just report what's happening, it shapes how people interpret what's happening. A solid performance can be called promising by some and not enough by others. A mistake can be seen as part of development or blown up into a bigger concern than it actually is. That's the environment Shedeur is stepping into. And it's unpredictable. Some analysts have already leaned into the skepticism, questioning whether Cleveland is moving too fast, wondering if the team is creating pressure instead of letting things develop naturally. Nothing extreme, nothing confirmed as a real issue, but enough to plant doubt. At the same time, there's another group pushing the opposite narrative. They see the college production, the composure, the flashes from his rookie season, and they believe the Browns might have quietly found their answer at quarterback. Two completely different interpretations. Looking at the same player. That's the narrative war. And it doesn't stay on TV or social media, it reaches the fan base. Some fans are fully bought in. Others are waiting for proof. Some are excited. Others are cautious. And that split creates something interesting. Because now every game isn't just about winning or losing. It's about validation. If Shedeur plays well, one side says, "We told you." If he struggles, the other side responds, "This is what we warned about." There's no neutral ground. And that's where things can get complicated. Because quarterbacks don't develop in a vacuum. They develop inside noise. Inside expectations. Inside reactions that can shift week to week. And sometimes, those reactions don't match the bigger picture. We've seen this before across the league. Young quarterbacks labeled too early, judged too quickly, either overhyped after a few strong games or written off after a few rough ones. The cycle repeats. But here what makes this situation different. The Browns didn't just allow the narrative to form. They helped start it. By publicly positioning Shedeur the way they didn't just make a football decision, they created a storyline. And once a storyline exists, the media runs with it. Some reports even suggest Cleveland wanted to control the message from the beginning, cut out speculation, set expectations early, make it clear who the focus is. Again, nothing officially confirmed. But the way this has unfolded, it feels intentional. Still, controlling the narrative early is one thing. Maintaining it, that's something else entirely. Because once the season begins, the control shifts. From the front office to the field, that's when performance takes over. That's when opinions either get stronger or start changing. And sometimes the shift happens fast. One strong stretch and the narrative flips positive. One rough stretch and the questions get louder. That's the reality of this level. And that's why this section matters more than people think. Because Shedeur isn't just being evaluated as a quarterback. He's being evaluated as a storyline. Every throw adds to it. Every decision shapes it. Every game rewrites part of it. And in a league where perception can move just as fast as performance, that matters a lot. So while the focus stays on stats, wins, and development, there's something else happening in the background. A constant debate about what this situation really is. A breakout waiting to happen. Or a narrative built too quickly. Right now, no one has the full answer. But that's exactly why people are watching so closely. Because once reality finally catches up with the narrative, only one version survives. And when that moment comes, it doesn't just change opinions. It changes everything. At the end of all this, it comes down to one simple question. Did the Cleveland Browns make a bold move or a risky one? Because everything they've done points in one direction. Shedeur Sanders is not just part of the plan. He is the plan. And that's what makes this situation different from anything Cleveland has done in years. There's no confusion at quarterback, no rotation, no slow competition being dragged out through training camp. They've made their stance clear early and publicly. That kind of commitment sends a message. To the locker room, to the fans, and to the rest of the league. But here's the reality most people are starting to realize. Commitment like this comes with consequences. If Shedeur delivers, if the growth is real, the offense clicks and the team starts winning, then everything changes overnight. Cleveland doesn't just look improved, they look like they finally figured it out. The narrative flips instantly. From doubt to validation. From questions to confidence. But if things don't go that way, that's where the gamble shows itself. Because when you build this much around one player this early, there's no easy reset, no quiet adjustment. Every struggle becomes visible. Every loss gets tied back to the same decision. And the pressure doesn't fade, it builds. Some fans already believe this is the moment Cleveland has been waiting for. Others think the team might be moving too fast, putting too much weight on a quarterback still proving himself. Both sides are watching the same situation, just seeing it differently. And that's what makes this so unpredictable. Because talent alone doesn't decide outcomes in the NFL. Timing matters. Fit matters. Confidence matters. And sometimes things either click all at once or don't click at all. Right now, Cleveland is betting that everything aligns. The protection holds. The system fits. The chemistry develops. And most importantly, the quarterback at the center of it all rises to the moment. That's the bet. And it's not a small one. Because if they're right, this becomes the foundation of something serious. A team that finally has direction, stability, identity. But if they're wrong, then this decision doesn't just fade away. It becomes the reference point for everything that follows. And that's why this isn't just about a quarterback anymore. It's about timing, belief, and risk. Because in the NFL, the difference between a breakthrough and a setback usually comes down to one move. And right now, Cleveland just made theirs, but what happens next might decide if this was genius or a mistake they can't undo.